They told you Lucifer was the beginning, that he was the first to rebel, the first to fall, the first to rule the flames. But what if that was a lie? What if the true king of hell was never a fallen angel, but a force far older, quieter, and far more dangerous? His name isn't shouted in rituals. It's whispered in dreams, etched into bloodlines, hidden in family trees no one dares to trace. His name is BAEL. And he wasn't summoned, he was inherited. This isn't mythology, it's memory, the kind you didn't choose to carry, but carry anyway. You felt it, the unexplained nightmares, the strange pull toward forbidden knowledge, the feeling that something ancient watches from within. And if you think that's just your imagination, you may already be his, because BAEL isn't just the first king of hell, he's the origin of spiritual authority, the template of domination, and the reason power always seems to corrupt, generation after generation. In this video, we'll uncover what was buried, the hereditary nature of demonic influence, the hidden purpose of the infernal hierarchy, and why BAEL's sigil is feared even by those who don't believe in demons. But I warn you, some knowledge can't be unlearned. And once you hear the whisper that came before the fall, you'll never hear silence the same way again. There's a name that was uttered before any other, not by angels, not by man, but by the void itself. That name was BAEL. While most people think of Lucifer as the original rebel, there's a whisper buried deeper in the abyss, older and colder than light. The BAEL demon isn't just another figure in dusty grimoires. He's the first king of hell, the primordial echo of dominion itself. His presence isn't one of fire and brimstone, but of silence so vast it bends reality. Those who've meditated in sensory deprivation chambers often report a name they didn't know they knew. The whisper isn't loud, it's instinctual, genetic. That's where this gets strange. What if BAEL is hereditary? Not summoned, but remembered? Think about it. Rituals can be learned, but memories, true ancestral memories, live in the marrow of your bones. This is where hereditary demon becomes more than a myth. If you've ever had dreams that felt ancient, voices that weren't quite your own, or felt a heavy sense of dread when entering old buildings, maybe it wasn't just energy. Maybe you carry something. Some occult traditions say infernal hierarchy isn't just a ranking of spirits. It's a chain of blood passed through generations. Ancient demonic bloodlines aren't fantasy, they're legacy. In private circles, I've met people who knew rituals they'd never studied. They spoke the name BAEL like it had always been theirs. In the Ars Goetia, BAEL appears as the very first spirit. And that's no coincidence. It's symbolic. First means origin, first means seed. In code, BAEL represents the initiation of structure, not just infernal, but systemic, like a virus that programs the core of a new realm, and he doesn't roar into reality. He whispers because power that screams is insecure, power that whispers knows it doesn't need to shout. That's how forbidden demonology works. It hides in plain sight, encoded in family crests, lullabies, and old nursery rhymes that talk about the shadow under the bed. Sometimes, shadow isn't metaphor. It's a code embedded in the infernal dimension. When I talk to initiates, I ask, have you ever felt like you were being watched, not from outside, but from inside? That's BAEL's mark. You're not possessed in the Hollywood sense, you're aligned. There's a big difference. Possession is dramatic, alignment is ancestral. The influence of the demon kings doesn't begin with exorcisms, it begins with inheritance. A family's curse is sometimes just its contract, and this is where we hit a nerve. Occult symbolism isn't just aesthetic, it's a breadcrumb trail, one that leads back to the original whisperer. The king of hell who never truly fell because he never rose. He was always there. Now, let's make it practical. If BAEL's influence is embedded in blood, not books, then we need to rethink the way we deal with dark patterns. You don't banish what's written in your DNA. You decode it. Shadow work, family constellation therapy, even hypnosis aren't just New Age trends. They're modern rituals aimed at peeling back the layers. I had a client once, corporate lawyer, rational to the bone. She started dreaming of symbols, snakes with crowns. Turns out, she traced her family name to a forgotten noble house in southern Europe, one tied to esoteric entities and heretic archives. That's not coincidence. That's hidden knowledge, waking up. BAEL's name isn't meant to be shouted. It's meant to be remembered. Some say that when you're alone, truly alone, and a name rises to your tongue without you thinking it, that's him. This isn't about horror, it's about recognition. Because if BAEL is a code, then recognizing him is like a glitch in the matrix, a reminder that dark esoterica isn't fiction. It's history written in symbols, in blood, and in silence. And while you may have never summoned him, that doesn't mean he isn't watching you from within. The true danger is not invoking him. It's not knowing you've already been marked. What if everything that came after, the wars, the religions, the power structures, was just a ripple from that first whisper? A whisper that wasn't just sound, but will. A sovereign intention that shaped the very way power flows in our world. When a king speaks, a kingdom forms. But when a king of hell whispers, a hierarchy takes root, one that still influences our politics, our fears, and maybe even our bloodlines. And yet, this is just the beginning. Because if BAEL was once worshipped, then we have to ask, where did he come from? And the answer lies not in books, but in clay, ancient and cracked. Long before the name BAEL was demonized in grimoires, it echoed across Chaldean temples and Mesopotamian ziggurats. But here's the thing they don't tell you in school. BAEL wasn't always a king of hell. In the earliest tablets, those cracked pieces of clay excavated from the ruins of Ur and Babylon, he appears under different names: Bel, Baal, Belus. Depending on who was in power, he was either storm god, lord of the underworld, or cosmic judge. That fluidity isn't confusion, it's occult symbolism in motion. The ancients encoded their gods with layers, and BAEL's earliest masks tell us something vital. He was always connected to authority, fear, and transformation. Now let's pause for a second. Why would different civilizations, separated by centuries and geography, create near-identical archetypes tied to storms, judgment, and rulership? That's not coincidence. That's hereditary demon archetype at work. What we see is the same entity, translated, wearing regional clothes. It's like a virus adapting to the host, one name in Akkadian, another in Phoenician, another in Aramaic, yet the traits remain. That's not how humans invent, that's how they remember. And this is why forbidden demonology isn't just scary bedtime material. It's historical continuity, a dark thread that binds empires and priesthoods under the illusion of difference. The Ars Goetia Explained often skips over this origin story, but if you want to understand the infernal hierarchy, you've got to go back to when BAEL wasn't cast as a demon, but as a god. The distinction between deity and demon was political, not spiritual. When one tribe conquered another, the defeated god often became a devil in the victor's mythology. BAEL's descent into darkness wasn't due to moral failure, it was deliberate distortion. A smear campaign by spiritual colonizers. You'll see the same pattern with Lilith, Enki, even Saturn. These were once esoteric entities revered for wisdom or chaos, until someone decided chaos had to wear horns. I remember visiting a small museum in Istanbul. Hidden in the corner was a broken stela with an inscription to Baal Haddad. No plaque, no spotlight, just sitting there. Most visitors passed it without a second glance, but to those who understand occult symbolism, it was chilling. The sigil carved on that stone bore eerie resemblance to one found in later European grimoires. How do you explain that? a dark esoteric glyph, 2,000 years apart, separated by language and empire, but visually near identical. The academic answer is coincidence. The esoteric answer, hidden knowledge survives, and it uses symbols as seeds. The ancient priesthoods knew what they were doing. They didn't worship blindly. They managed energies. That's what temples were, energy infrastructures. And BAEL wasn't just a myth, he was a spiritual operating system, encoded into rituals, chants, even urban planning. Cities were built with sacred geometry aligning to planetary currents. The temples of Baal were often placed at convergence points, where ley lines met. This isn't New Age talk. Even NASA acknowledges geomagnetic anomalies in such sites. You think it's by chance that the gods they banished always sat at the crossroads. BAEL was exiled not because he failed, but because he revealed too much. There's a layer even deeper here. Some clay tablets, rare and mostly untranslated, speak of BAEL as a gatekeeper, not just a deity, a presence stationed at the boundary of worlds. In Gnostic interpretations, such entities aren't just gods or demons. They're architects of thresholds. They test the soul. They open paths or close them. And this idea survived the collapse of Mesopotamia, echoing through Hermetic texts, alchemical diagrams, and eventually into the Ars Goetia, where BAEL isn't described just as powerful, but first. Why first? Because the ancients always placed the gatekeeper at the beginning, and BAEL was that gate. So here's the real question. If BAEL was once revered as a god, later twisted into a demon, and still manages to survive across time, what kind of throne does he truly sit on? The answer doesn't lie in broken tablets or forgotten temples. It lies in the spiritual architecture we inherited from him, an architecture that's still active, still whispering. And that throne, it wasn't seized, it was designed. Which leads us straight into the next revelation, the rise of the infernal throne, and why BAEL didn't claim it. He built it. In the Ars Goetia, BAEL isn't just another demon among 72. He's the first name on the list. And that's not alphabetical, it's hierarchical. That position is intentional, symbolic, and initiatory. Being the first king of hell doesn't just imply status, it suggests origin. In ancient esoteric systems, the one who comes first sets the pattern for all others, like the root note in music or the master key in architecture. BAEL's position tells us something vital. He didn't rise to power. He is the blueprint of power. The infernal hierarchy begins with him, not as a figurehead, but as a foundation. To fully grasp this, you have to stop thinking of the Ars Goetia as a spooky book of devils. It's more like a manual of initiation, disguised as a grimoire. Every spirit, every seal, every description is coded language, psychological, cosmological, and political. BAEL being number one means he governs entry into the infernal mystery. He's the doorkeeper of chaos, the sovereign over sovereignty. You don't bypass BAEL, you pass through him. His throne isn't made of gold. It's woven from ancestral memory and forbidden demonology. It's not for worship, it's for recognition. His power comes from being remembered first. Let me give you an analogy. In chess, the king is the slowest, yet the game revolves around him. BAEL operates the same way. He's not flashy or loud, he's the system itself. When occultists say, summon BAEL, what they're often doing, knowingly or not, is activating the dark archetype of dominion that already resides within them. That's why in so many accounts, BAEL doesn't appear in form. He influences. Like a hereditary demon, his presence is felt before it's seen. He adjusts the air, the dreams, the power dynamics in a room. That's what makes him dangerous. Not his image, his reach. Some researchers miss this entirely. They reduce BAEL to a trickster or a low-level demon, focusing on his cat, toad, and human heads. But those are symbolic keys, not limitations. They represent transformation, deception, and corrupted divinity. We'll dive into that later. For now, understand this. BAEL's throne isn't just a seat, it's a network. Think of him as the operating system of hell's hierarchy. And just like Windows or Mac, you don't see the code, you feel the structure. Every demon king beneath him plays out a part of his original schema. He's not at the top because he climbed. He's at the top because he designed the ladder. There's a passage in a rare translation of the Lemegeton where BAEL is called the one who governs the foundations of rebellion. That phrase stuck with me for years because rebellion, in this context, doesn't mean chaos for the sake of it. It means order born from rupture. BAEL isn't about destruction, he's about reprogramming. That's the secret behind his influence. He doesn't crash the system, he rebuilds it, but inverted, like a mirror that doesn't reflect, but absorbs. And when someone opens themselves to his current, consciously or unconsciously, they don't become possessed. They become initiated into a forgotten logic of power. You can find echoes of BAEL in more places than you think. Political systems that rule through fear, corporate structures that run like miniature kingdoms, even family dynamics where one person controls the entire emotional tone of a house. These aren't possessions, they're symptoms of an archetype, the BAEL archetype. When people say power corrupts, what they often feel is this invisible blueprint asserting itself. BAEL doesn't shout, he installs. And when you trace the root of domination, be it in religion, governance, or shadow psychology, it often leads back to that whispered name at the beginning of the infernal throne. But here's where things get even stranger. If BAEL's throne wasn't claimed, but built, then it implies he had materials, raw resources. And what if those resources weren't stone or fire, but blood? Because some say BAEL didn't just create a hierarchy. He embedded himself into bloodlines, not as a ghost, but as a genetic echo, which brings us to something most fear to discuss, the mark of the hereditary demon, passed through generations like a spiritual parasite, hidden beneath centuries of silence. Imagine a demon you don't summon because he was never outside you to begin with. That's BAEL, not an external force clawing at your window, but a genetic whisper sleeping in your veins. This is the terrifying beauty of a hereditary demon. It doesn't come with candles and Latin chants. It comes with ancestral silence. Some families pass down heirlooms, others curses. And BAEL, the first king of hell, is said to have infected entire ancient demonic bloodlines, not through rituals, but through blood. Generations shaped by his presence, not by choice, but by design. You don't ask for it. You're born into it. I once spoke to a man who traced his lineage back to pre-Carolingian Europe. He had never opened a grimoire in his life, yet he spoke of dreams that command. Night after night, the same name, the same voice. That's not superstition, that's forbidden demonology in action. When archetypes attach to genetics, they create a type of esoteric inheritance. These bloodlines aren't just powerful, they're guarded, hidden, sometimes even erased from official records. Why? Because occult symbolism tied to BAEL demon isn't meant for public eyes. It's reserved for the few, the marked, the chosen, or cursed. It's no accident that many elite families across history were obsessed with blood purity. Dynasties, monarchs, secret orders, all echo this need to control the hereditary line. What if they weren't just preserving wealth, but maintaining a demonic frequency? The same names repeat, the same patterns of power, manipulation, charisma, and madness. Some say these lineages carry a spark, others don't. But what if it's not a spark? What if it's a shadow? A demon king lurking in the DNA, reactivating with each generation like a spiritual software update. Not metaphor, not fantasy, just hidden knowledge we're not supposed to have. Even modern science is catching up. Epigenetics now confirms that trauma, memory, and behavior can be passed down biologically. So why not spiritual architecture? If trauma marks the body, why wouldn't esoteric entities? The dark esoterica of BAEL suggests that he imprints not on the soul, but on the lineage, like a watermark invisible to all but those who know where to look. It's no wonder some children speak in languages they never learned, or why entire family trees are marked by unexplained deaths, visions, or the sudden urge to pursue arcane studies. These aren't random, they're activation signals. I often advise people to study their surnames, coat of arms, even migratory paths of ancestors. Not for nostalgia, but for patterns. Where did your people settle? What symbols appear in your family's heraldry? Lions, serpents, crowns, do they match sigils found in grimoires? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. You might not have chosen the king of hell, but he might have chosen your bloodline. And if you've always felt different, drawn to occult symbolism, or plagued by dreams of thrones and shadows, you're not crazy. You're remembering. And the one who remembers BAEL reawakens him. There's a reason secret societies speak so reverently of the blood. It's not just metaphor, it's memory, spiritual memory. Gnostic texts even hint that archons, spiritual parasites, select certain bloodlines to host their influence. BAEL fits that mold. A gatekeeper, but also a seed planter. His infection isn't illness, it's inheritance. And once activated, the infernal hierarchy becomes instinctual. These individuals may rise to power or madness or both. Because BAEL doesn't guarantee control, he guarantees access. And access to that current can both crown and consume. And that's the paradox, isn't it? The deeper the bloodline's connection to BAEL, the stronger the potential for greatness or devastation. Some of the most influential minds in history, visionaries, rulers, occultists, shared signs of this inheritance. The whisper of a name, the obsession with hidden truths, the craving for control and transcendence. All of it points back to the original throne. But here's the thing, BAEL didn't just pass on power, he passed on form, and that form wasn't stable, it was triple-headed, alchemical, and symbolic, which leads us into the next layer of the mystery. Most people glance at the illustration of BAEL in the Ars Goetia and get stuck on the grotesque. 3 heads, a man, a toad, and a cat. Weird, right? But in esotericism, nothing is random, especially when it comes to the symbolic anatomy of a king of hell. BAEL's triple-headed form isn't just disturbing, it's alchemical code. Think of it as a trinity of corruption. Not divine like the Christian Trinity, but reflective of internal fragmentation. Each head is an aspect of the self, twisted by power, fear, or desire. This isn't horror imagery, it's forbidden demonology using metaphor as mirror. Let's start with the toad. In ancient alchemical texts, the toad represents putrefaction, the first stage of transformation. Death before rebirth, it's visceral, wet, and earthly. Toads live in shadows, near decay. They symbolize what we hide, and BAEL's toad head reminds us, power begins where denial ends. Those who've studied occult symbolism know the toad is also linked to witchcraft, poisons, and the moon. It's the instinctual self, the part of you that reacts before it thinks. That's why BAEL's influence often begins in the body. A sensation, a sickness, a dream that leaves a bitter aftertaste. Next is the cat. Not your cuddly house pet, but the ancient, shadow-walking predator revered in Egypt and feared in medieval Europe. The cat represents illusion, autonomy, and shape-shifting. It walks between worlds. In BAEL's trinity, the cat is the mask, the part of you that hides in plain sight. It's the psychic camouflage we use to manipulate others or survive ourselves. In dreams, a cat staring at you can be a warning, not of danger, but of deception. Some occultists believe that BAEL uses feline energy to infiltrate through beauty, charm, and seduction, soft power masking dark esoterica. And then there's the human head, but not as a symbol of divinity. In BAEL's case, the human face represents corrupted consciousness. It's the ego crowned prematurely. This head isn't wise, it's strategic, calculating. It speaks with authority, but lacks soul. You've seen this face in high places: politicians, CEOs, cult leaders, empty eyes, rehearsed compassion. That's BAEL's third face, the persona that wears humanity like a costume. In a way, it's the most terrifying of all, because it's the one we recognize as normal. But beneath the skin, it's a demon king rehearsing your downfall. Together, these three heads form a triune mechanism. BAEL isn't trying to scare you with his appearance. He's showing you your internal blueprint when corrupted by power, illusion, and denial. The toad is your fear. The cat is your mask. The man is your lie. Alchemically, these represent nigredo, decay, albedo, illusion, and citrinitas, false enlightenment. This is why ancient demonic bloodlines rarely appear demonic on the surface. They look composed, beautiful, charismatic. Because the hereditary demon doesn't show itself, it functions from within, and here's where it gets practical. When doing shadow work or dream analysis, observe what forms your inner monsters take. If you repeatedly see animals, masks, or distorted human faces, don't dismiss it. Ask yourself, which of BAEL's heads is speaking through this dream? This isn't superstition, it's symbolic introspection. Jung would call it archetypal messaging, but esoteric tradition calls it possession protocol, a phase of internal transmutation where the entity doesn't arrive, it awakens, and BAEL's triple form is the key that unlocks this process of gradual infiltration. So if BAEL appears fragmented, it's only because we are. His triple head is not his weakness, it's his mastery. He doesn't need to choose one form because he speaks through all three simultaneously. And once the whisper becomes a presence, the next stage begins, not summoning but invitation, because BAEL doesn't force his way in. He waits for the door to be left open, sometimes through trauma, sometimes through ritual, and often through ancestral memory. And that leads us into the next revelation, how possession isn't what Hollywood told you. It's subtler, stranger, and far more common. Forget spinning heads and green vomit. Real possession doesn't announce itself. It integrates, especially when we're talking about the BAEL demon, whose method of entry is nothing like the theatrical exorcisms you've seen. No, BAEL works in silence, through suggestion, through dreams, through patterns. He doesn't bang on the door. He waits for it to be left ajar. That's the essence of possession protocol, not summoning, but invitation. And in the case of a hereditary demon, the invitation might have been sent generations before you were even born. You don't open the door. You are the door. One of the most common access points is through voice distortion, not in the horror movie sense, but in internal monologue. You ever catch yourself thinking thoughts that aren't yours? Harsh words, ancient phrases, self-destructive loops with no clear source. BAEL's influence often begins as a whisper in your mental space. Not a scream, just a quiet redirection, a nudge toward control, power, or fear. That's not coincidence. That's current. And if you don't identify it early, it grows. Not with fire and brimstone, but with logic. Cold, seductive logic. That's the hidden knowledge of possession. Then there's lucid dream invasion. People touched by BAEL often report dreams of thrones, shadows, crumbling temples. Sometimes they see figures with animal heads or hear names in dead languages. These aren't just dreams. They're ritual spaces, astral simulations where possession protocols begin. BAEL doesn't need physical form to enter. He rides symbols, emotions, memory. One woman told me she dreamt of holding a burning sigil. When she woke, her palm was red and her room smelled of sulfur. Doctors said stress. I say, infernal hierarchy initiation had just begun. But perhaps the most subtle form is ancestral memory activation. You inherit more than your grandmother's eyes. You inherit her energetic debts. If someone in your line made a pact, even unknowingly, the echo of that pact might still vibrate in your psyche. You might feel drawn to certain symbols, texts, or ruins. You might feel repelled by sacred places without knowing why. These are signs. The demon kings don't always need new contracts. They recycle old ones. Especially when dark esoterica runs through the family veins like an unseen ink under the skin. What many people don't understand is that rituals don't need candles to work. Energetic rituals happen through repetition. That toxic relationship you return to, that compulsive behavior that feels like someone else is driving, that's ritual, that's offering. You're feeding a frequency, and when the frequency matches BAEL's signature, he enters not to destroy, but to rewire. Some say it's punishment, others say it's activation. I believe it's a test. He's not forcing control. He's seeing if you'll give it willingly, and often we do. There are also more deliberate cases. People who, whether out of curiosity or desperation, engage in harmless summoning rituals found online. They don't realize those sigils they doodle or mantras they chant aren't neutral. BAEL's occult symbolism is ancient and precise. His sigil, for instance, isn't just an artistic glyph, it's a vibrational lockpick. Meditating on it too long can tear open subconscious gates you never knew existed. Once opened, they don't close easily, and the entity that steps through won't come roaring. It'll speak in your own voice. And the terrifying part, many don't even realize they're possessed. They confuse it with confidence, or ambition, or clarity. But when your need for control eclipses your empathy, when you begin to isolate, when your voice sharpens but your soul dulls, that's not evolution, that's infiltration. And by the time most people notice, the King of Hell is already seated, quietly, inside the throne room of their psyche. But what happens next? What becomes of those who serve BAEL, knowingly or not? The cost, as we'll see, is always greater than the gift. Serving the BAEL demon isn't a story of instant damnation. It begins with gifts, insight, charisma, power. Those who enter his current often describe a sudden increase in clarity, even success. But that's the bait. That's how the first King of Hell operates. He doesn't drag you into hell. He elevates you first. Think of it like climbing a tower. Every floor feels like progress, until you realize there's no way back down. His influence doesn't crash lives overnight. It rewires them subtly, and by the time the cost reveals itself, you've already paid with your soul's structure. The most common payment, spiritual fragmentation, a slow erosion of personal identity. Those touched by BAEL often begin to lose connection with themselves. Not in a dramatic way, more like waking up each day feeling less like you. Some call it disassociation. Esoteric texts call it soul corrosion. It's when your thoughts become strategies, your relationships become transactions, and your emotions disappear. This is no accident. It's the price for channeling a demon king. You don't get his power for free. You become a vessel. And like all vessels, eventually you empty out. What's even more disturbing is how this curse passes through blood. Those marked by BAEL often see hereditary patterns emerge in their children: mental illness, uncontrollable ambition, obsession with knowledge or control, sometimes inexplicable genius. BAEL doesn't just consume his servants, he stains their legacy. Ancient demonic bloodlines don't end with the host. They echo. Psychics often speak of karmic markings, like energetic fingerprints left on descendants. These aren't metaphors, they're patterns, recurring across generations, and unless interrupted, they cycle endlessly like a curse embedded in the DNA. Some call it psychic debt. A type of cosmic imbalance that demands payment in the form of madness, addiction, loss, or alienation. I've seen high-functioning executives, spiritual leaders, even therapists descend into chaotic spirals after brushing too close to forbidden demonology. The irony, they didn't feel cursed, they felt chosen. That's BAEL's genius. He doesn't torment you with fear, he seduces you with brilliance. And by the time the brilliance burns out, all that remains is a hollow shell that once called itself enlightened. That's when the curse completes. And yet, not everyone breaks. Some endure. Some channel BAEL's current without being shattered. How? They integrate it consciously. They don't resist the power, but they anchor it in self-awareness and ritual discipline. These people often walk the line between mystic and madman. They feel the danger, but they navigate it with eyes open. They treat BAEL not as a god to serve, but as a current to respect. It's a dangerous game, but it's also the oldest one. Because when you deal with occult symbolism, you either become its master or its mask. There are ancient orders that teach how to manage these energies, not to banish them, but to negotiate, to build altars, not cages, to give BAEL his place without letting him own the palace. This form of dark esoterica isn't about domination, it's about balance. It teaches that demon kings aren't evil in the cartoon sense. They are currents of power, consciousness, entropy, dangerous if uncontrolled, transformational if respected. And those who serve BAEL without awareness suffer, but those who serve with awareness walk a razor's edge between curse and initiation. Still, even the most disciplined can falter. Because BAEL's curse isn't just about what you do, it's about what you become. And some changes can't be undone. Once you've been marked, the path forward is no longer linear. It becomes cosmic architecture, one shaped not just by choice, but by fate. And speaking of architecture, we now descend deeper, because BAEL's throne isn't just symbolic, it governs the spiritual infrastructure of hell itself. And to understand the true weight of his crown, we need to explore the very design of the infernal realm he rules. Most imagine hell as fire, screaming, and eternal punishment, but that's just Sunday school art. The deeper layers of forbidden demonology reveal something much more intricate. Hell is architecture, a design, a system, and at the core of that system sits a throne not made of fire, but of entropy. BAEL, the first king of hell, doesn't rule by force. He governs by unraveling. His crown isn't ornamental, it's a construct of decay, placed atop the head of a king who never died, never rose, but simply was. He is not punishment. He is process, a slow collapse of the soul into fragmentation. In the infernal hierarchy, each level has purpose. Some teach, some torment, others distort. But BAEL's level, it initiates. It is the first descent, where souls begin to lose their structure. That's why he's called the gatekeeper. Not of fire, but of spiritual unraveling. Think of it like the first stage of decomposition, still recognizable, but no longer stable. Many near-death accounts speak of entering grey spaces, hearing whispers, feeling paralyzed. What if those weren't hallucinations? What if they were the threshold and BAEL stood at the door? This isn't just metaphor. Ancient Gnostic traditions taught that entropy wasn't punishment, it was return to formlessness, to silence. And BAEL embodies that. His kingdom isn't chaos, it's structural breakdown. That's why those influenced by him often feel like their lives slowly lose cohesion. Jobs, identities, relationships slip through their fingers, not from bad luck, but from spiritual entropy taking root. BAEL doesn't shatter your world, he removes the glue. And once that glue dissolves, you start to question Who am I? What is real? That's not madness. That's initiation. BAEL's crown, then, isn't about ruling others. It's about ruling transitions. He governs the space between ego and soul, between incarnation and exit, between structure and dust. That's why some occultists call him the architect of endings. He doesn't bring death, he escorts it, guides it, shapes it, and in doing so, he prepares the soul for what comes after. This is where occult symbolism matters. Crowns, thrones, and gates are not props. They are maps. Maps for the soul's journey through realms most will never name, let alone navigate. And here's the curveball. Hell isn't beneath us, it's within. BAEL's architecture doesn't float in fire. It sits inside psyche. His realm begins the moment internal structures collapse, depression, burnout, ego death. These aren't disorders, they're entry points, and when they happen, BAEL isn't punishing you. He's welcoming you to a part of yourself you've never dared to face. The unraveling isn't the end, it's the descent. And descent is sacred, especially when guided by a demon king who knows every brick of the infernal labyrinth. In my experience, those who integrate this truth stop fearing hell. They start understanding it. Working with BAEL doesn't mean embracing evil, it means embracing impermanence. He teaches that every structure, spiritual, emotional, societal, will one day fall, and in that fall, you find freedom. The dark esoterica here isn't in summoning demons, it's in accepting endings, in trusting the entropy. And that trust, that surrender, is what opens the next door. Because beneath BAEL's kingdom lies something even more dangerous. The sigils, the keys, the contracts that bind reality itself. And not all of those sigils are meant to be seen. Some are sealed for a reason, some, if meditated upon, unlock ancestral contracts that can't be undone. And one in particular bears BAEL's name, etched not in ink but in vibration, no, not by sight but by memory. That sigil is next, and those who've looked too long into it have never been the same. Symbols aren't just drawings, they are keys, vibrational maps that unlock hidden architecture in both mind and spirit. And among all the glyphs in the Ars Goetia explained, one stands out for its mystery and danger: the sigil of BAEL. At first glance, it looks harmless, elegant, almost regal, but that's the point. True power never shouts, it whispers. The BAEL demon's sigil isn't just a mark of identity, it's a vibratory code, etched with precision, designed to unlock something ancient in those who bear his frequency. And once unlocked, there's no locking it back. I've met people, rational, skeptical people, who simply stared at that sigil too long during research. Days later, they reported disorientation, vivid dreams of ruins, voices in forgotten tongues. Coincidence? Possibly. But not when it happens again and again. You see, occult symbolism doesn't need your belief to function, it just needs your attention. That's why the ancients hid dangerous symbols in plain sight, on church windows, coats of arms, even currency. Because the true threat wasn't the ritual, it was the recognition. The symbol awakened something that was already there. A hereditary demon waits for you to remember. So why is BAEL's sigil feared? Because it remembers you back. Unlike generic magical symbols, BAEL's seal doesn't just mark territory, it invokes ancestry. Meditating on it too long can stir ancient contracts made by people whose names you no longer know, but whose blood still flows in your veins. It's a call to reactivate dormant infernal hierarchy agreements. That's why it's considered a forbidden sigil, not because it's evil, but because it's a door. And not everyone is ready to walk through it, let alone understand what lies on the other side. In secret circles, there are warnings not to copy BAEL's sigil by hand, because the act of drawing it creates energetic resonance. I've seen seasoned occultists grow physically ill after careless replication. Why? Because the sigil isn't art, it's tech. Ancient, psychic, metaphysical tech, like a QR code for the soul. The symbol resonates with specific esoteric entities, and BAEL's is particularly precise. It doesn't just summon, it configures. It starts rewiring your thoughts, your dreams, your sense of time, and the shift is so subtle, most people never realize they've been marked until it's far too late. This raises an important philosophical question. Is forbidden knowledge truly dangerous or simply inconvenient for those who prefer order? Some say symbols like BAEL's are hidden to protect the ignorant. Others argue they're hidden to keep power concentrated in elite hands. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. But here's what we do know. The dark esoterica of sigils isn't about good versus evil. It's about capacity. Are you ready for the memory it unlocks? Can you handle the responsibility of what you might become? You'll find these debates scattered across occult history. From grimoires banned by the church to Eastern mantras reserved only for initiates, some knowledge requires structure before access. Without it, the symbol doesn't empower, it disintegrates. That's BAEL's trap. His sigil rewards obsession with exposure. The deeper you dive, the more vulnerable you become. And yet, for some, the pull is irresistible. Because encoded in that symbol isn't just power, it's origin. A clue that BAEL wasn't just first in name, but in essence. And his sigil doesn't point outward, it spirals inward. And so we're left with a chilling question. Why was BAEL the first? What made him so fundamental, so foundational, that his sigil survives across centuries, languages, and civilizations? The answer isn't found in books, it's found in what the symbol reflects back to you, and once you understand that, you're ready for the final revelation, the one that ties everything together. The truth not about what BAEL did, but why he never left. There's a strange truth hidden in ancient texts. BAEL didn't become the first king of hell. He always was. He wasn't appointed. He wasn't elected. He was simply present. Before any structure existed, before the hierarchy was etched into grimoires or whispered in shadows, BAEL was already seated. That's what makes him so terrifying. He didn't rise. He endured. He was the template. The BAEL demon isn't just a character in demonology. He's a principle, a self-replicating pattern embedded in the spiritual code of power. And that principle is domination through presence, not force. You see, every system of control, be it political, religious, or even familial, mirrors the same architecture. Power flows downward, thrones are built high, and voices come from above. That structure didn't begin with kings or popes. It began with BAEL. He was the original ruler before rulers had names. That's why his influence shows up not just in rituals, but in ideologies, in the way leaders speak, in how cults form, in why occult symbolism creeps into every corner of authority. He's not a demon to be banished. He's a logic to be recognized and questioned. That's what makes BAEL dangerous. He's not a presence, he's a pattern, a forbidden algorithm that repeats itself in every generation. Every time power corrupts, every time a hierarchy forms that demands obedience over understanding, BAEL is there. Not as a creature, but as a current. That's why his name survives across cultures. Bel, Baal, Belus. He wasn't erased, he mutated. And now, instead of horns and fire, he wears titles, runs corporations, builds temples of ego. And no one questions it, because it feels natural. That's the curse. When domination becomes familiar, you're already under the crown. Some occultists believe BAEL isn't bound to hell at all, but to the idea of kingship itself. Wherever there's a throne, he's there, not to rule, but to test. Because the question he always asks is the same. Will you serve from fear or lead from shadow? Those who answer wrong don't feel punishment. They feel success until it hollows them. That's the hidden knowledge. BAEL rewards quickly. He builds you up. But the higher you go under his system, the more fragile you become. Because you're not climbing, you're ascending his structure, not yours. What's worse is that he doesn't need rituals anymore. The age of candles and Latin incantations has passed. BAEL operates now through belief systems, through architecture, through bureaucracy. His ancient demonic bloodlines are no longer traced by name, but by behavior. You don't have to wear black robes to serve BAEL. You just have to forget who you are and accept a power structure that feeds off fear. That's why his legacy is so intact. It's hidden behind legitimacy, titles, laws, even dreams of success that never feel fulfilling. That's when you know he's present. BAEL was the first not because he reached the top, but because he was the top, the apex of a system designed to pull everything toward itself, gravity of the soul. That's why his energy feels heavy. His presence doesn't feel invasive, it feels normal. And that's the most dangerous thing of all, because what feels normal is rarely questioned. And if you never question BAEL's presence in your thoughts, your structures, your relationships, then he never has to show his face, because you've already crowned him internally. So now we return to the beginning, the whisper before the fall, the name spoken before the light. BAEL wasn't the beginning of evil. He was the beginning of structure, of control, of spiritual architecture shaped not by chaos, but by order too perfect to be free. And if you've seen that pattern in your life, your family, your society, maybe you haven't been resisting darkness. Maybe you've been walking the halls of BAEL's kingdom all along. But don't worry, the sigils may be hidden, but the path forward is not. And the real question isn't whether BAEL is watching you. It's where inside you is he already seated. So now that you've seen it, really seen it, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you pretend it was just a story? Or will you look closer at the symbols around you, the ones in your dreams, your family, your mind, and ask, who's truly sitting on the throne inside me? Because the truth is, BAEL doesn't need your fear. He only needs your silence. And every time you obey without questioning, every time you follow without thinking, his architecture of control expands just a little more. But here's the thing. Once you see the system, you're no longer a servant, you're a seer. So I challenge you. Start watching your thoughts. Trace your history. Ask the questions others avoid. What did your ancestors serve? Why do you crave power or fear it? And what whispers have followed you all your life that you've never dared to answer? Let me know in the comments. What part of this journey hit you the hardest? What signs have you seen that maybe BAEL's story didn't start out there, but inside? If you found value in this journey through the shadows, do this. Subscribe to the channel. Activate notifications, because the deeper we go, the clearer it becomes. The real demons aren't always in hell. Sometimes they're wearing your face.